Reading with your kids.
Hey, so great to see you. Come on in. Hi, my name is Jed Lee, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are so very thankful that you are taking time to join us today. If we could ask for just another moment of your time, if you haven't done so already, please take a moment to give us a review on whatever podcasting app you're listening to us on. We have a wonderful show for you today. Our guest today is a New York Times best-selling author of Revenge of Magic, Story Thieves, and Half Upon a Time. Our guest is James Reilly. We really do have a fantastic interview. We don't have a lot of time, but we do want to let you know that we are looking for a few great schools to host our all-new in-school experience that we are calling Reading with Your Kids Live. That's right, Reading with Your Kids Live. We're looking to celebrate our shared love of reading and learning with storytelling, magic, and lots of fun. We're even going to hopefully feature some of the students in your community on a future episode of the podcast. You can learn more about this great experience by visiting our website, readingwithyourkids.com/live. I am so very excited. Coming to us from right outside of Washington, D.C., and I'm going to steal his introduction from his Amazon page. Our guest today is a New York Times best-selling author of Half Upon a Time and Story Thieves series, as well as many books too unwritten to count. Please welcome to the show, James Reilly. James, how are you?
Good. Thank you for having me.
I love that you're the author of two so many books. I missed this completely up. Many books too unwritten to count.
It's true. I mean, we're approaching infinite numbers of books that I haven't written yet.
Well, the books that you have written have really excited lots and lots of kids, and we're real excited that you have a brand new series coming out in March called Revenge of Magic.
Yes. Revenge of Magic is actually, so I've been writing I've been writing fairy tales when I first started out. That was Half Upon a Time. And then I wrote a series called Story Thieves, which was not really tongue-in-cheek, but it was about a girl who was half fictional and she could jump into books. So there was very much like an awareness of what was happening. One of the main characters is a huge fan of books, so he always wants to go into his favorite books. And it references a lot of other books and like what it would be like if fictional characters knew they were in books and if they could kind of confront their authors about that, because authors don't treat their fictional characters very well. Mm-hmm. So I was thinking of what to do next, and I decided that it might be fun to do something a little more serious. All my books have lots of jokes in them because I just can't take myself that seriously. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to do something in the real world, sort of, and I always thought it'd be fun to do something about a school for magic. So the idea behind Revenge of Magic is that 13 years ago, several books of magic are all uncovered around the world on the same day. No one really knows where they came from or why they're in the places they are. And they don't even know actually that they work because it takes the governments of the world a few years to discover that only people born on that day or after can use them, which means kids. Mm-hmm. So we're 13 years later. There's actually no one knows about them because they're kept very secret. And we have a main character named Fort Fitzgerald, Forsyth, and he goes by Fort. He's in Washington, D.C., which I am local to, so it was fun to kind of send monsters there. He's in Washington, D.C. with his father, kind of visiting the Lincoln Memorial when the ground starts to shake and this enormous hand comes up through the earth and ends up taking his father back with the hand down into the earth. So this shakes up the entire world. There's suddenly monster attacks. It's like the supernatural thing. And the government like says they're on top of things, but they don't reveal that there's this secret government run school of magic for kids, because kids being the only ones who can use that magic. So, Fort ends up getting an invite there. And his motivation is he wants revenge. He thinks his father is gone permanently. He wants to kind of get some power to take on these monsters. But the school has other ideas and they have secret reasons for wanting him there. So I thought it'd be kind of fun to do sort of an Ender's Game type version of maybe a Hogwarts, as opposed to kind of going more J.K. Rowling with it. So it's definitely a little bit of politics, not very much, but more like kind of what would a school for magic be in maybe the real world run by the military. So it's hopefully fun. It's going to be 7 books. I'm working on the 3rd one right now. So they're going to be coming out pretty quick. So I better get moving. And yeah, the first one will be out in March on the 5th.
That's really, really exciting. Well, to be honest with you, if I were going to send monsters anywhere, it would absolutely be to Washington, D.C. If not to clean up politics, just get rid of some of the traffic you guys have to deal with every morning.
That's what I was saying. I was talking to somebody on Facebook who was a local, and I was like, haven't you imagined just when you've been sitting in traffic that suddenly a monster appears out of nowhere and just wipes it all out? Isn't that kind of a fantasy we've all had in the DC area? And it's fun because we have these amazing monuments and they're beautiful, and there's never really any good reason when you're a local to kind of go down there. You need a good excuse. So I got to kind of, just for research, take a trip back into the city, kind of look at, it's really amazing how beautiful these monuments are. And of course I destroyed them, but like in a good way, in a positive way. Yeah, just for fun, for entertainment.
Yeah. We're the same way here in Boston. Only time I get into seeing the historical things in Boston is when we have family from another country coming up and wanting to see it.
Yeah. Which is always a great excuse. But otherwise it's just kind of, you drive by like things that have changed history, and you've got the White House and Congress, and it's beautiful, but you just never really have a good excuse. So.
Yeah. Well, I had a humbling experience once where I had a student from China. We host international students here, and one of them was with me, and we're walking through Boston, and I pointed out a house. I think it was Paul Revere's house. And I said, that house over there, that's over 300 years old. Woo. And then we went back home, and she was showing me some pictures of her city in China. And there's a bridge that's over 1,200 years old. And I go, oh, sorry.
Yeah, we didn't exist.
Tommy, this is a really, your book's a middle grade series, and they're really, really fun. What is it about that audience that you enjoy writing for?
I think it's kind of a few different things. One, I'm probably emotionally about that same age. I like playing with magic. I always liked fairy tales for that reason. I like the idea that like you walk outside your front door and magical things can happen. That's not always a good thing. Sometimes it's like a witch or a giant who's trying to eat you, but other times it's somebody trying to sell you a magical cow and you honestly have no idea. Or you're trying to sell your cow for magical beans. Then you really have no idea if that's true or not. I love the idea that magic is possible. And I also like, for this age group in particular, we haven't kind of gotten at that age quite so cynical as teenagers as we get. No, that might just be me, but when I was sort of that age, I was reading all kinds of stuff, a lot of fantasy, and I didn't need to read sort of more adult things that were a little more cynical and had to kind of wink at stuff. And I like that. I like that you can be a little more sincere and have like big fights against good versus evil, and have the sort of thing. You have characters who aren't in charge of their lives, and they can't really take control because they're still young. But that means the places where they can find power and agency, it can be really kind of an interesting way to present what does it mean to be a hero for those kind of kids. So I think it's a fun age. Every kid who I've ever met who's been a fan is amazing. They all they're just so open-minded and kind of ready for anything. So it's kind of been a bunch of different things. And also, like, growing up, I had a bunch of favorite authors, like, Lloyd Alexander, who wrote the Chronicles of Friday. He was one of my favorite authors. J.D. Fitzgerald, who wrote the Great Brain books. I think those are still in print, but those are some of my favorites. So, like, looking back, I like the idea that I'm not reaching those levels, but it's like, I'd like to kind of give kids what I had growing up, which was just something that sparked my imagination and gave me a love for reading. And like, that's always the goal. That's certainly not easy to reach. But if I can do that for any kid, that's just amazing.
Yeah. One of the things you were talking about is, kids not being in control and kind of understanding that they're not in control. And one of the things that I notice is that, with the younger middle grade kids, they're aware of that and they're understanding that they don't have a lot of control and they want some more, but they kind of get that they don't have it. And the older that you get, when you get into those cynical teenager years, they understand that they don't have any control and they don't really know what's going on, but they don't think that they can let anybody else know that. And so they work really, really hard trying to put up this front like, I know everything. And meanwhile, it's like, none of you guys know anything.
That's a great point. I think I've been doing that almost subconsciously with my characters, because you don't have to have that same kind of, I mean, certainly kids at like age 12 will still have that front that they'll put up and try to look cool and not be like looked down upon. But there's less of that. There's less of like, sort of society as a whole looking at you and being like, this is what you're supposed to be. I think they're still at that age where like you can still be kind of goofy and you can still be kind of, you don't have to be too cool for everything. And so they can be goofy. And one of the things I love writing about, with my characters is letting them make all kinds of mistakes and be goofy and just be clumsy and all these things that maybe in an older audience would sort of be looked down upon. But like my characters tend to make friends that way.
Yeah. One of the things, James and I were talking about me doing educational magic shows before we started speaking. And one of the things that I love is when I go, especially going into an inner city school system in a Camden or a Baltimore or Boston or New York. And I'll be in a middle school, and I've actually had this happen at middle school in Camden, New Jersey, where the principal just shakes his head and says, "Who in the world invited you to come in here?" And then I actually had a guy introduce me that way. He goes, "I don't know why this guy is here. Just be quiet, and it's going to be over in 45 minutes." and then I went out, and just one of the things about magic is it just kind of melts away a lot of those fronts that kids think that they have to put on. And this principal just was beaming at the end of the hour when he got to see his tough 7th and 8th graders kind of just melt away and become kids again. His attitude amazing. Completely changed. And to his credit, he got up and apologized to me in front of everybody and said, "I was wrong. This was wonderful."
That's a great point. Like magic really does sort of, I mean, it can do that to adults so easily because we don't understand how it's happening. It's something that it's like outside our reality, and it just is like, it's wonderment. And I feel like you can do that with books too, because, as a reader, you're the one reading it alone. You don't have anyone judging you for what you're reading, maybe, unless you're doing it in public or anything, but, you can read that story and like, feel for those characters and kind of get that experience where it feels very like personal because you're the only one there and you're reading about these characters. So you can kind of knock down those walls that way too. I love that. It's an amazing thing about reading, but I hadn't really thought about that with magic too.
Well, it is. It's just, I think that whole experience for kids of just being able to sit back and go for a ride that's safe. And kind of let somebody else take control. And like you said, whether in a theater where it's dark or no one's looking at you, or you're at home reading a book and no one's looking at you, you can just kind of sit down and relax and let go of all those facades that you think that you need to keep up to save face. Yeah. Tell me, do you have any, because here in the Reading with Your Kids podcast, we're always encouraging families to read, no matter what age your kid is, to read together. Certainly, I don't think families will sit down and read Revenge of Magic on the couch together, although that would be pretty cool. But definitely encourage families to co-read together. What kind of conversations do you think families could have if they were co-reading Revenge of Magic series together?
That's an interesting question. I've actually had so I have had parents co-reading Story Thieves with their kids, which is like a huge honor because occasionally the parents are like, "Oh, I really liked it too," and I kind of envision myself as the reader, like sort of an ageless version of myself.
Uh-huh.
So I try to make it appropriate for anyone who happens to be reading it. So it's really nice to hear that adults might be enjoying it too. But a lot of parents will sort of read it, alongside their children, both so they know what their children are reading, but also because then they can talk about it, like you're saying. So Story Thieves opens up a lot of questions, about like, what a book is, what fiction is, and things along those lines. Revenge of Magic would be interesting. I don't want to give away too much because there's a lot of spoilers in it, but there would definitely be questions. It's a bit more of a serious thing. And like I said, Fort's father goes missing in the very first, the first 20 pages. So I think there'd be a lot of interesting questions you could have about like what it would mean to sort of grieve for a parent, for a child. That might be kind of getting a little too serious, but, it really affects Fort as a character for good reason. And everything that kind of comes from that is, that's with him for the rest of the book and to the rest of the series, like what that means for him, what it meant to sort of, because he didn't have control in that situation. He couldn't help his father. He was actually pulled away, and wasn't able to help his father in that situation. And he feels guilt, and he misses his father, and he hears his father's voice in his head. So he still sort of feels him there, but he's not. So I think there might be some interesting questions there. And then there would also be the question of, he goes to the school for magic and they have different, disciplines. So there's like a destruction magic, which has like fireballs and it can like, shake the earth and things like that. It's sort of more elemental. And then there's a healing kind of magic, which kind of concerns everything with the body. So it can heal somebody. It can like change their shape of their body, things like that. And Fort wants to learn destruction magic because he wants revenge. But he ends up actually getting put into the healing school, for a variety of reasons. And that's not what he wants to do. He wants to get out there and like get justice for his father and, you know, make those monsters feel the hurt that he did. So I think there could be a lot of interesting questions and discussions about that. Like, what does it mean? What would it mean if he actually got revenge, and what would that do for him? Would it actually help anything? Because that's something that comes up in the book. Not to spoil anything, but there's an opportunity somewhere in the book where he could kind of take that, and what he chooses might lead to some interesting questions too.
Yeah, just as you're speaking, I'm thinking, obviously losing a parent, just losing somebody is very traumatic, but there's a lot of traumatic kind of things that kids, especially at this age group, kind of go through. And, you know, that whole question of, you know, do I find a way to forgive and move on and heal, or do I want revenge? And, you know, I think that those are some really, powerful and important discussions that families can have together.
For sure. Yeah, just like just as you said, like maybe maybe somebody's getting bullied. Maybe somebody just has, a friendship that doesn't work out. And you feel that you feel anger, you feel betrayed, you might feel hurt. And how do you release that? How do you sort of deal with that? So yeah, there are definitely multiple. That would be really interesting.
Yeah. You know, as we're talking, I just have some flashbacks. My son just got married. And,
congratulations.
Thank you. I'm sure people on the podcast are tired of hearing me mention that. But it was such an amazing moment. It was such a wonderful moment. And it was wonderful because, you know, my son was dealing with these feelings, nervous and happy and overjoyed and all that kind of thing. And just as we were speaking now, I had some flashbacks to him as a middle grader. And one of the hardest things for him was to kind of understand his feelings. And, you know, what is this? Am I feeling anger? Am I feeling sad? Am I frustrated? And you know, with him, a lot of those kind of, any kind of bad feeling just got turned into anger. And a big learning process for him was just kind of being able to sit down and talk about feelings and what they were and different and how you can be sad without becoming angry, and that it's okay to be sad. And I love, and those are important conversations to have with kids. And I love having them through through a book, through a story, because it takes a lot of pressure off the kids. We're not talking about you necessarily. We're talking about this character.
Yeah, there's that separation. So you can say, oh, so, you can look at from the outside, how would you act if you were this kid? And that's with all this happening. And so, yeah, so that indirect, I love that too. I think that's one of the magical things about books is that they let you live out someone else's life, and kind of feel what it's like without having that actually, because obviously book characters go through a lot of terrible things usually. But you can live out that life with them and be supportive of them and kind of understand how they're feeling about everything without actually having that traumatic experience. So it definitely helps us learn. It helps us kind of feel our own emotions about these things, but also kind of take another look at our own lives. And that's something, when you were just speaking, it raised a question of, one of the things I liked in the book that I got to put in was that, Ford is the same way. Everything kind of turns into anger, and he gets kind of almost numb because he's felt so much anger about all of this. And then when he gets to the school, he kind of is able to release some of that. But when it comes out in a bad way, he also sees himself taking on sort of that anger and becoming something he doesn't want to be. So I like that you can kind of see that in a character and maybe kind of put up a mirror to your own life, maybe, because it is you don't ever want to get to the place where you're like, oh my gosh, look at how I'm coming across to people because I'm so angry or I'm not dealing with one of my feelings in some way. So I love that books can do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Books are such a great way to help our kids experience things, like you said, without the trauma, without the danger, without getting the skin, knees, and broken bones.
Exactly.
Yeah. Have you noticed? So obviously, you've been writing and entertaining kids and enlightening kids for years now. Have you noticed any kind of shift, or has your writing had to change now that kids are so immersed in technology?
That's an interesting question. I've gotten, with Story Thieves in particular, both because I think, that series kind of was a big success for me, which was a huge honor, and I was incredibly lucky that it caught on. But, because it involves kids jumping into books, the question always came up, what else can they jump into? Can they jump into video games? Can they jump in? Someone just asked me if they can jump into YouTube. I said, I hope not. That would be really, I don't think that's good for anybody. But it's kind of, I liked doing something that was very much about a love for books because I wanted to bring up why books in particular were so special. And they had things about them that you couldn't really do in other mediums. Like, I love movies and I love video games and I love comic books, but there's something about like prose books that is special in and of itself. And if you experience them in that way, you'll get something out of them that you maybe couldn't get out of a video game or all video games. So I wanted to kind of write a love letter to books and why they were so special to me. Because I've only been writing since I've only been published since about 2010. But, and I've been doing a lot of fantasy stuff. So it's been like fairy tales and everything. So it hasn't necessarily been, about technology in a way that kids would bring up to me, but I've definitely seen it just going to schools, and seeing like even from 2010 to now, how everyone has a cell phone, whereas, maybe half of them did, 10 years ago or a quarter of them. So it's become so prevalent and everyone's connected. Weirdly though, I've actually seen, when I first, was published, there were a lot more kids reading ebooks. And I've seen that kind of go down. I don't know if it's been, just easier for kids to check out books in the library. They get books through like Scholastic book fairs, which I still love. And I still have memories of doing those. Those catalogs are the greatest. Or if it's just, teachers and librarians are recommending books, but I've definitely noticed that kids, and they come up with like, they'll come up with just, their books are all very well loved and very used. And I love that because that means they've read them a bunch of times, and they've lent them out and things like that. Whereas like when I first started, I think I signed a couple of Kindles, and I haven't seen that in years. So, I don't know if it's if it's just sort of people are discovering that books do have that something unique about them, just holding, pages in your hand and like feeling them and turning the page. I don't know if that's sort of a reaction to technology or just something that's sort of naturally evolved. But it has been interesting. Even in my own life, I tend to buy a lot of ebooks because I don't have the room in my bookcases for a bunch of stuff. But if I love something, I will probably go out and get a physical copy of it. Because I want to have that tactile experience of turning the pages and seeing the words, in a way that just doesn't exist on ebooks.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah. Fascinating. I've just been amazed. One of the things with technology and kids I've been amazed at is how clueless a lot of adults have been about how immersed kids have been in technology for some time. I remember being at a school and for some reason, and this happens a lot, just something will pop into my mind, and usually it doesn't get me into trouble, but sometimes it does. And I just said, hey, I'm just curious, how many of you guys are on social media? And I'm talking to 3rd and 4th grade kids, and 60% of the hands went up. And I know a lot of them just went up because their friends' hands went up, but the teacher just fell on the floor. They're like, what? and it's, and I know that there was that a lot of 3rd and 4th graders are on Facebook and Instagram because they find me. And I was like, you're too young. Go away.
That actually reminds me of something. I get that question a lot because I post like, different places to find me if they have questions when I do school visits, so they can come to my website and ask questions anonymously and stuff, and I'll just answer them. But once I started putting on my Instagram, I started getting questions of whether I would follow them back. Like just during Q&As, they'd be like, so if I follow you on Instagram, will you follow me back? And I was like, probably not, honestly, because I can't really do that for every kid, because I would just be following children left and right. But,
yes.
But that just had never even occurred to me that would be an important question to ask.
Yeah, crazy. Well, we're excited. And now, did you always set out to be the author of series, or did this just kind of evolve?
I always loved the concept of series because growing up, I loved the idea. If you found a book you liked and then usually going in, but if you found something that you really liked, knowing that there were like 5 more to come, that was huge. I love that. And maybe that's because I grew up reading a lot of like fantasy, so those series tend to be more deliberately kind of epic in scale, and so they have you can cover something, you can cover like an important thing in one book, but it all leads up to a bigger storyline in a multi-book series and stuff. So I love the idea of doing that. And it's, of course, with publishing, you never quite know if you're going to get to tell your whole story. So there's always a question of like, should I make this book very self-contained, or should I set up things to go on? And there's something I noticed with J.K. Rowling in particular when I was reading Harry Potter for the first time. I love that she seeded all of these little plot points in the first few books that would later come up and have like big payoffs at the end, because it really makes you feel like you're in the hands of someone who knows what they're doing, whether or not that's sort of faking it till you make it kind of thing. Because I like to do that too. I like to give kids little snippets of hints and little just side mentions of things that are going to pay off later, just so they feel like they're in good hands and that someone has planned this out and knows what's happening. But it also makes you feel like you're living in this larger world. And that's sort of harder to do with one book, or even like 2. So I've loved that about series, and I like being able to do set up things to come and leave kids on cliffhangers, which they're not always fans of. But, because I think that's a lot of fun to be on the edge of your seat, like wondering what's going to come next.
Right.
So there are all these little things about series that I kind of love. And I don't know if it's just how I think now, or if I just sort of, I kind of tailored that when I was first writing. But now I don't have any ideas for single books anymore. I could probably think of one if I tried, but I love doing series. And I like that kids get so invested too. Like the more they live with the series, they start writing fan fiction and they'll send you art of the characters, and that's so amazing as an author just to see like the connection that they have with them. And I think that's one of the benefits of series too. It's like they're living with these characters. They're growing up with these characters. If they're reading them as they come out, that's an amazing thing that you can do. You can kind of evolve your characters with the readers. So yeah, there are all these benefits that I really love about series.
That's fantastic. Well, we want folks to know where they can connect with you online, not necessarily if you're 12 and on Instagram, but where can they find your website?
The easiest way to find me is James Reilly, JamesRiley, author.com. And that has links to all my social media. That has a description of, I'm going to be going on tour in March, so they can find like places to get books signed and stuff like that. And it also has my blog, so I try to post all important stuff there. So that's an easy way to find me. You could probably Google me too. Which there's also a soccer player named James Reilly. That is not me. Okay. Unfortunately.
Stay away from the soccer player. Oh, but no, he could be a good guy. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But check out JamesRileyAuthor.com. The cover art for Revenge of Magic is there, and it really is an amazing cover. That the fist coming up out of the ground and grabbing onto the monument, and it's just, I just know your kid's interest is going to be absolutely captivated at that. If, I know as a middle grade kid, that would definitely, that book would not be able to stay in the library shelf if I came in and saw that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's hope. Yeah.
We've been talking to the author of Revenge of Magic, the brand new series that's coming out March 6th, James Reilly. James, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been fun.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Tiffany Bloom. We are celebrating International Women's Month in March, and we're kicking it off with Tiffany Bloom. She is the author of She Dreams, and you do not want to miss her. Hey, if you are the author of a great children's book, we would love to have you as a guest on the show. Being a guest on the show gives you a chance to tell thousands of people about your fantastic children's book. Being a guest is fun, it's easy, and it is absolutely free. You can learn more by going to our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Click on the contact button, let us know about your great book. We'll let you know the next easy steps. Hey, I want to thank James Reilly for being here today, and of course we want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to us. Thank you so much for taking the time to subscribe to the show on iHeartRadio or iTunes or Himalaya or Stitcher Radio, whatever podcasting platform you're listening to us on. Thanks so much for taking the time to write a review, hopefully a 5-star review of the show, and help other people find us. And of course, thank you so much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.